He was 5 seconds away from destroying the entire restaurant. This wasn't about a bad Yelp review. This was a man with enough power to turn the building into a parking lot by the morning. The manager was shaking. The security team was reaching for their holsters. And the billionaire? He was screaming in a language he thought no one in that pretentious New York dining room could understand. He called the staff filth. He called them peasants. He turned his back to walk out forever. But he made one mistake. He didn't know the girl pouring his water knew exactly what he was saying. She opened her mouth, spoke 3 words in his native tongue, and the entire room went dead silent. That was the moment her life changed from a nightmare into something dangerous. The night it happened, Adela Vance's bank account balance was exactly $42.16. She remembered that number because she had just checked it in the locker room of l'Orangerie, the kind of Manhattan restaurant where a side of asparagus cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Adela was 24, drowning in student loans, and working for a man named Marcus Sterling, a manager who treated his staff like disposable napkins. Marcus was the type of guy who would deduct 5 minutes from pay if a tie was slightly crooked. He was a tyrant in a cheap suit, desperate to impress the Manhattan elite who treated him like furniture. "Adela!" Marcus snapped his fingers in her face, pulling her out of her daze near the service station. "Table 4. Now, if you mess this up, don't bother coming back tomorrow." She smoothed her apron, her hands trembling slightly. "Who is it, Marcus?" "Zaid al-Hamed," he whispered, the name dropping from his lips like a prayer. "Oil, tech, real estate. The man basically owns half of Dubai and is buying the other half of New York. He's been here for 10 minutes, and he's already sent back the wine list twice. He ate a server alive at the Pierre last week. Do not breathe wrong near him." Adela nodded, grabbing a pitcher of ice water. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Zaid al-Hamed wasn't just a billionaire. He was a shark in a tailored Italian suit. The tabloids called him the Prince of Ice because he never smiled, never stayed in one relationship for more than a month, and ruthlessly dismantled companies that failed to meet his standards. She walked out onto the floor. The atmosphere in l'Orangerie was always tense, but tonight the air felt thin, like right before a thunderstorm. Table 4 was the prime spot, strictly VIP. Sitting there was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was terrifyingly handsome, sharp jawline, dark eyes that scanned the room with bored contempt, and a posture that screamed dominance. He was flanked by 2 men in suits, his security, and a nervous-looking personal assistant who was typing frantically on a tablet. Zaid looked at his watch. He tapped the table. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed in the hush of the restaurant. Adela approached the table. "Good evening, sir. My name is Adela. I'll be taking care." "You are late," Zaid said. He didn't even look up at her. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but cold. "I asked for sparkling water 7 minutes ago. This is tap." He gestured to the glass on the table that the busboy had placed. "I apologize, sir," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I have the sparkling right here." She reached to pour. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was the way his security guard shifted. But her elbow bumped the edge of the oversized menu. The heavy leather booklet tipped over, knocking the wine glass. Clink. It didn't break. It didn't even spill much, just a single, solitary drop of red wine that flew through the air and landed in slow motion right on the pristine white cuff of Zaid al-Hamed's $10,000 suit. The entire restaurant seemed to gasp. Zaid froze. He looked at the red dot on his wrist. Then he looked up at her. For the first time, their eyes met. His were the color of dark espresso, and they were burning with a fury that felt physical. "Get out," he said softly. "Sir, I am so sorry. I can get club soda and—" "I said—" He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "Get out." Marcus, the manager, materialized out of thin air. He was sweating profuse amounts of panic. "Mr. Alhamed, sir, please, 1,000 apologies. She is new, she is incompetent. Adela, get away from the table. You're fired. Get your things." Marcus turned back to Zaid, practically bowing. "Sir, please, allow me to comp the meal. Allow me to—" Zaid held up a hand, silencing him. The billionaire looked around the restaurant, his lip curling in disgust. He looked at the wealthy patrons watching him. He looked at the terrified staff. And finally, he looked at Marcus. "I do not want your free food," Zaid said, his accent thickening with anger. "I came here for a quiet negotiation. Instead, I am assaulted by incompetence." He threw his napkin onto the table. "We are leaving." "Sir, please!" Marcus grabbed Zaid's arm. A fatal mistake. The security guard stepped forward instantly, muscles tensing. Zaid shook Marcus off as if he were a bug. Then, Zaid lost it. The cool facade cracked. He turned to his assistant and began to shout, but not in English. He switched to Arabic, rapid-fire and furious. He assumed, confidently and arrogantly, that in this room of white-collar Wall Street bankers and American socialites, his words were a private shield. He looked directly at Marcus, then at Adela, and spat out a stream of Arabic. "Hadha al-makan mazbala, al-ta'am qimuma, wal-muwazzafun aqbiya la yastahiqqun hatta masal ahdiya. Urid an ashtari, hadha al-makan, faqat li ahrikahu." Translation: "This place is a dump. The food is garbage, and the staff are idiots who aren't even fit to wipe shoes. I want to buy this place just to burn it down." His assistant nodded fearfully. "Naam, Sheikh Zaid. Immediately." Zaid adjusted his cuffs, sneering at Adela one last time. "Wahiya, hiya la shay, mujarad hashara." And her? She is nothing, just an insect. He turned his back on her. He turned his back on Marcus. He began to walk toward the exit, his entourage forming a phalanx around him. Marcus was on his knees, figuratively weeping, seeing his career end. The room was silent. He was 5 steps away from the door. Adela felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Not embarrassment, anger. She had worked 3 jobs since she was 18. She had nursed her mother through chemo while studying at night. She was tired. She was broke. But she was not an insect. "Wait," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. Zaid didn't stop. He didn't care what a fired waitress had to say in English. So she didn't speak English. Adela took a breath, remembering the dusty streets of Amman, where she spent 6 years of her childhood, while her father was stationed as a diplomatic liaison. She remembered the dialect, the cadence, the specific weight of the words used to address royalty when they have lost their way. "Ya Zaid," she called out. He stopped. He didn't turn, but his shoulders stiffened. He heard his name. But more importantly, he heard the pronunciation. It wasn't the Americanized Zaid. It was the guttural, authentic sound. She continued, her voice clear and ringing in the silence. "Al-ihtiram la yushtara bil-mal, ya sayyidi, wa al-rajul al-haqiqi, la yados, ala al-du'afa, liyash'ur annahu qawi." Translation: "Respect is not bought with money, my lord. And a real man does not step on the weak to feel strong." The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed, but hadn't detonated yet. Marcus looked at her like she had just pulled a grenade pin. "Adela!" "Shut up!" he hissed. But Zaid al-Hamed turned around. He didn't turn quickly. He turned slowly, with the grace of a predator who has just heard a twig snap in the forest. He looked at his assistant, then at his guards, and finally his gaze landed on Adela. He walked back toward her. The entire restaurant held its breath. The security guards looked confused. They hadn't expected the waitress to speak flawless Levantine Arabic. Zaid stopped 2 feet from her. He towered over her. She could smell his cologne, oud sandalwood, and something like rain. "What did you say?" he asked, in English this time. His voice was dangerously low. She didn't back down. She couldn't. She was already fired. What more could he do? She looked him in the eyes. "Kultu annaka, takallamta, kathiran an al-athya, lakin al-wahid, alladhi yatasarraf, ka-al-tifl, huwa anta." Translation: I said you spoke a lot about shoes, but the only one acting like a child is you. A collective gasp went through the room. A woman at table 6 actually covered her mouth. Zaid stared at her. His face was unreadable. For 10 agonizing seconds, he just studied her face, searching for fear. He found exhaustion, he found anger, but he didn't find fear. Then, the impossible happened. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Where did you learn to speak?" he asked, ignoring everyone else in the room. "Jordan," she said. "My father was stationed there. I went to local schools. I know when a man is insulting me, regardless of the language he uses to hide it." Zaid looked at the spot on his cuff where the wine had landed. Then he looked at Marcus, who was trembling. "You fired her?" Zaid asked Marcus. Yes, immediately, Mr. Alhamid. She's gone." Marcus squeaked, thinking he was appeasing the billionaire. "Pity," Zaid said. He turned back to Adela. "I detest incompetence, Adela, but I detest cowards even more. And this man," he gestured to Marcus, "is a coward." Zaid reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a black titanium card. He didn't hand it to Marcus to pay for the meal he didn't eat. He handed it to Adela. "I need a translator," Zaid said. "My current one," he glanced at his sweating assistant, "is too afraid to tell me when I am being arrogant. You, it seems, have no such problem." She stared at the card. It was heavy. It had a number embossed in gold and a crest she didn't recognize. "I'm a waitress," she said dumbly. "I have a shift tomorrow." "Not anymore," Zaid said. "Marcus just fired you. Be at the lobby of the Obsidian Tower tomorrow at 8 a.m. Do not be late. And wear something—" He looked at her stained apron. "That doesn't smell like cheap vinaigrette." He turned to his entourage. "Yalla. Mashna. Let's go. We're moving." And just like that, he swept out of the restaurant, leaving a wake of stunned silence and a manager who looked like he was about to faint. Adela looked down at the card in her hand. Obsidian Capital. Zaid Al-Hamid, CEO. She didn't know it then, but taking that card was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. She thought he hired her because he was impressed. She was wrong. He hired her because he was in trouble, and he needed someone nobody knew. Someone invisible. The next morning, Adela arrived at the Obsidian Tower at 7:55 a.m. She was wearing her only good blazer and a skirt she'd ironed 3 times. The building was a monolith of black glass piercing the sky. She walked up to the reception. "I'm here to see Mr. Al-Hamid." The receptionist, a woman with hair so tight it looked painful, sneered at her. "Mr. Al-Hamid does not take walk-ins. Do you have an appointment?" "He told me to come," she said. She rolled her eyes. "Honey, every girl in New York thinks he told them to come. Leave before I call security." "Call them," Adela said, channeling a confidence she didn't feel. "Ask them if they were at l'Orangerie last night. Ask them about the waitress who speaks Arabic." The receptionist hesitated. She picked up the phone, dialed a number, and whispered something. Her face went pale. "Send her up," a voice on the other end cracked. She hung up and looked at Adela with new eyes, fearful eyes. "Penthouse. Elevator A. He's waiting." She stepped into the elevator. As it shot up 50 floors, her ears popped. The doors opened directly into a sprawling office that looked more like a fortress. Zaid was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over Central Park. He didn't turn around when she entered. "You are 5 minutes early," he said. "Better than late," she replied. He turned. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a dark button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they had seen labor, not just boardrooms. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a leather chair opposite his massive desk. She sat. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "I did a background check on you last night, Adela Vance," he said. "Father. Deceased. Mother. Currently undergoing treatment at Mount Sinai. Debt. Substantial. You are desperate." She felt a flush of shame. "Is that why you brought me here? To mock me?" "No," he said darkly. "I brought you here because desperate people are loyal, and I have a problem, Adela, a problem that money cannot fix." He slid a file folder across the desk. It was marked "Confidential" in red ink. "I have a business rival," Zaid said. "A man named Silas Thorne. He is trying to block my acquisition of a port in the Mediterranean. He claims to have leverage on me. Dirt. Secrets from my past." "What kind of secrets?" she asked. Zaid's eyes hardened. "The kind that gets people killed. Thorne is hosting a gala tonight. He has a dossier in his private safe that contains this fabricated evidence. I need to get into that safe." She laughed nervously. "Okay. Call the police, or a lawyer. I'm a waitress, Zaid. I serve pasta. I don't crack safes." "I don't need you to crack the safe," Zaid said, stepping closer. "I need you to be the distraction. Thorne has a weakness for exotic narratives. He loves the Middle East. He fancies himself a scholar. I need you to go in there as my fiancée, a Jordanian heiress." "Fiancée?" she choked out. "You're insane." "I will pay off your mother's medical bills," he said flatly. "In full. Today. Plus $100,000 cash for one night of work." The room spun. Her mother's treatment cost thousands a month. They were drowning. This man was offering her a lifeline. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because Thorne knows my staff. He knows my associates. He doesn't know you. You are the variable he won't see coming." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal, Adela?" She looked at his hand. She looked at the file. She thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, worrying about money she didn't have. She stood up and shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "Deal," she said. "Good," Zaid said. A wicked smile touched his lips, not the angry one from the restaurant, but something sharper. "Then we have work to do, because if we get caught tonight, Adela, being fired will be the least of your worries." The transformation of Adela Vance into Layla Al-Fayed, Jordanian shipping heiress, was less like a makeover and more like a military operation. Zaid snapped his fingers, and within 20 minutes his penthouse was swarming with a team of stylists, tailors and jewelers. They didn't speak to her. They spoke about her, measuring her inseam and debating color palettes as if she were a mannequin. She stood on a podium in the center of his massive living room, feeling exposed, while Zaid sat on a leather sofa, sipping espresso and critiquing everything. "No," Zaid said, dismissing a shimmering gold gown a terrified assistant held up. "Too ostentatious. It screams new money. Layla Al-Fayed has had money for 400 years. She doesn't need to shout. She whispers, He pointed a long finger at a deep emerald silk dress that looked simple, but probably cost more than a car. That one. It brings out the defiance in her eyes. When the dress was fitted, it felt like a second skin, cool and terrifyingly expensive. The jeweler stepped forward. He opened a velvet box. Inside rested a necklace of diamonds and emeralds, so large it looked heavy. Zaid stood up and took the necklace. He dismissed the jeweler with a nod. "Turn around," he ordered her. She hesitated. "I can put it on myself. Turn around, Adela." She turned. She felt his warm fingers brush the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. The cold metal hit her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. For a second, his hands lingered on her shoulders. In the reflection of the window, she caught him looking at her, not as a boss, not as a co-conspirator, but as a man surprised by what he saw. He stepped back quickly, the icy mask sliding back into place. "This is the Star of Amun. It's insured for $12 million. Do not lose it. And more importantly, do not let Silas Thorne touch it." "Who is this Silas Thorne exactly?" she asked, touching the cold stones at her throat. "You said he's a rival, but this feels like war." Zaid walked to a wet bar and poured himself a scotch, eschewing the ice. "Silas Thorne is a bottom feeder who thinks he's a shark. He made his money in arms dealing before rebranding himself as a venture capitalist. 10 years ago, he tried to destroy my father's company using fabricated scandals. My father didn't survive the stress. He died of a heart attack 2 months later." Zaid turned to her, his eyes black holes of unresolved rage. "This isn't business, Adela. Thorne thinks he has dirt on me to stop a port deal. But tonight, I'm not just getting that dirt back. I'm going to ruin him in the exact same room where he plans to celebrate his victory." The gravity of the situation hit her hard. She wasn't just acting in a corporate play. She was stepping into a decade-old blood feud. He handed her a thin tablet. "Your backstory. Study it. You have 1 hour. You went to boarding school in Switzerland. You dislike horses because of a childhood fall, and you are deeply bored by American businessmen. That last part shouldn't be hard for you to fake." She spent the next hour memorizing the life of Layla Al-Fayed. It was terrifying how easily Zaid had fabricated a human being. At 7 p.m. they descended to the private garage. A sleek, armored Maybach was waiting. As the car navigated the Manhattan traffic toward the Pierre Hotel where the gala was being held, the silence in the back seat was suffocating. "Are you nervous?" Zaid asked, not looking at her, his gaze fixed on the city lights blurring past. "I'm wearing a house on my neck, and I'm about to lie to a dangerous arms dealer," she said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Yes, I'm nervous." "Good. Use it. Arrogance gets you killed. Fear keeps you sharp." He finally turned to look at her. The streetlights cast shadows across his sharp features. "The plan is simple. We enter together. We make rounds. I introduce you to Thorne. He will be charmed by you because he is weak for beautiful things he cannot have. You keep him occupied. Talk about Jordan. Talk about art. Insult his tie in Arabic if you have to. Just keep his eyes on you. And where will you be? I will slip away to his private suite on the 14th floor. The safe is biometric, but I have a bypass. I need 20 minutes. If he starts to look for me, you must stop him. Fake a fainting spell, spill a drink on him, seduce him. I don't care what you do, just don't let him leave that ballroom." He reached across the console and took her hand. His grip was tight, almost painful. "Listen to me, Adela. Silas Thorne is not Marcus the restaurant manager. If he realizes who you are, if he realizes what I am doing upstairs, he won't fire you. He will hurt you. Do you understand? She looked into his intense eyes. She realized then that Zaid al-Hamid wasn't just using her as a tool. He was also, in his own twisted, controlling way, worried about her. I understand, she whispered. The car slowed down. Flashes of light erupted outside the tinted windows. The paparazzi were waiting. Showtime, Habibti, Zaid muttered, using the Arabic word for my love, with zero affection. Chin up, you own the room. Remember, everyone here is beneath you. The door opened, and the noise of the cameras hit them like a physical blow. Walking the red carpet with Zaid al-Hamid was an out-of-body experience. Adela was blinded by flashbulbs, deafened by photographers shouting Zaid's name. Zaid was masterful. He didn't smile. He barely acknowledged them. He put a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the chaos with the indifference of royalty, stepping through mud. Who is she, Zaid? A reporter yelled. No comment, Zaid said smoothly, in a tone that suggested the question was an insult. They entered the grand ballroom of the Pierre. It was a cavern of crystal chandeliers, vaulted ceilings, and enough old money to bail out a small country. The air smelled of expensive champagne and heavy perfume. The moment they walked in, heads turned. It was a ripple effect. Zaid al-Hamid didn't attend these kinds of frivolous social events. His presence was an event in itself. And his presence with an unknown, striking woman dripping in emeralds. That was a scandal waiting to happen. They're staring, Adela murmured, keeping the bored expression Zaid had coached her on. Let them stare, he murmured back against her hair, making it look like an intimate whisper. They are sheep wondering why the wolf has come to dinner. They navigated the room. Zaid introduced her to senators, tech moguls, and oil barons. She played her part. She offered limp handshakes, gave vague answers in a slight accent she borrowed from her childhood friends in Amman, and occasionally said something disdainful about the humidity in New York. Zaid seemed pleased. Then the atmosphere shifted. A man separated himself from a group near the center of the room. He was perhaps 50, with silver hair perfectly coiffed, a tan that came from a bottle, and a tuxedo that was just a little too shiny. He was smiling, but his eyes, pale blue and watery, were dead cold. Zaid, the man said, his voice like oil slicking over gravel. I didn't think you'd show. I thought you were too busy, counting barrels. Zaid stopped. His hand on her back tightened perceptibly. Silas, Zaid replied, his voice flat. I couldn't miss your little party. It's so rare to see the nouveau riche desperate for validation. Silas Thorne laughed, a short, sharp sound. Always the charmer. Thorne's eyes immediately slid from Zaid to Adela. He didn't just look, he devoured. His gaze started at her face, traveled down to the emerald necklace, lingered on her chest, and then back up to her eyes. She felt dirty. And who is this stunning creature? Thorne asked, stepping closer to her, ignoring Zaid completely. Surely not another one of your flavor of the month models, Zaid? She looks far too intelligent for that. Careful, Silas, Zaid warned, his voice dropping an octave. You are speaking to my fiancée, Layla Al-Fayed. Thorne's eyebrows shot up. Al-Fayed? The shipping dynasty? My goodness. Zaid, you've outdone yourself. Merging portfolios through marriage. How medieval. Thorne took her hand and kissed the air above it. His skin was clammy. Charmed, my dear. Truly. She pulled her hand back slowly. Mr. Thorne, she said, adding a touch of Jordanian formality to her tone. Zaid has told me so little about you. All lies, I'm sure. Thorne winked at her. It was repulsive. You must save me a dance, Layla. I want to hear all about Amman. Perhaps, she said coolly. Zaid checked his watch, the signal. It was time. "If you'll excuse me, Silas," Zaid said. "I see the senator from Texas over there. I need a word about energy subcommittees. Layla, my darling, will you be all right for a moment?" "Of course," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't be long." "I won't," Zaid said. He looked at Silas. "Keep her entertained, Silas. But remember, she bites." Zaid walked away into the crowd, disappearing toward the service elevators that led to the upper floors. He was gone. She was alone in the viper's nest, with the biggest snake of them all smiling right at her. Silas Thorne offered her his arm. "Shall we get a drink, Layla? The champagne here is passable, though I prefer something stronger." "Champagne is fine," she said. They walked to the bar. Thorne was close, too close. She could smell gin on his breath beneath the mints. "So," Thorne said, leaning against the bar and staring at her intently, "tell me, how does a pearl of the desert end up with a stone like Zaid al-Hamid?" She took a sip of the champagne the bartender handed her, using the glass to shield her face. "Zaid is complicated. I like complicated men. Complicated is one word for it. Ruthless is another." "Did he tell you about his father?" Thorne asked, his eyes gleaming maliciously. "He mentioned business stress," she hedged. Thorne laughed quietly. "Stress? Yes. Zaid blames me for that, you know. He thinks I killed the old man with a few well-placed rumors. He hates me. Which makes me wonder." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Why bring his precious fiancée to my party? Zaid doesn't share his toys. Unless—" Her stomach dropped. He was suspicious already. "Unless what, Mr. Thorne?" she challenged, trying to channel Zaid's ice. "Unless you're not here to celebrate with me," Thorne murmured, his eyes scanning the crowd, looking for Zaid. "Unless you're here to distract me." He looked back at her, and the smiling mask was gone. The arms dealer was back. "Where did Zaid really go, Layla?" he demanded quietly. Panic surged. She had to do something. She had to get his attention back on her. She did the only thing she could think of that Layla Al-Fayed would do. She laughed, a loud, dismissive, arrogant laugh right in his face. "Oh, Mr. Thorne," she said, putting a hand on his chest, feeling the stiff tuxedo shirt beneath her fingers. "You are absurd. You think Zaid needs me to distract you? He thinks you are an insect. He's probably in the bathroom, making a deal that will buy this entire hotel before you finish your drink." She leaned in, mimicking his closeness. "And I think you are desperately jealous. It's not very attractive." Thorne looked taken aback. His ego was bruised. "Good." Then he grabbed her wrist. "Hard. You have fire," he sneered. "I like that. But let's test this little story of yours. Let's switch to your native tongue." He leaned into her ear and whispered, in broken, heavily accented Arabic, "Aina dahaba al-kalb?" Where did the dog go? He was testing her. He thought she was a hired escort Zaid had picked up in New York. He didn't think she spoke the language. She yanked her wrist out of his grip. She stood tall, looking down her nose at him, and unleashed the same fury she had shown Zaid in the restaurant. She spoke fast, complex, high-register Arabic, the kind used in diplomatic circles, the kind a street rat wouldn't know. كيف تجرؤ على الحديث معي بهذه الطريقة؟ لغتك العربية مثيرة للشفقة، مثل بدلتك تماماً. إذا لم تبتعد عني الآن، سأجعل زيد يشتري شركتك ويطردوك منها. Translation: How dare you speak to me that way? Your Arabic is pathetic, just like your suit. If you don't step away from me right now, I will have Zaid buy your company and fire you from it. Thorne blinked. He understood enough to know he'd been insulted, and enough to know she was fluent. The suspicion in his eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by anger. "Feisty," he muttered, straightening his jacket. Just then, her phone buzzed in her clutch bag. One vibration. It was the signal. Zaid had the dossier. It was time to leave. "I bore of this conversation, Mr. Thorne," she said coldly. "I'm going to find my fiancé. Do not follow me." She turned and walked away, her legs shaking. She had done it. She had bought Zaid his time. She headed toward the main exit, expecting to meet Zaid there as planned. She pushed through the crowd, the adrenaline crashing, leaving her weak. She reached the heavy brass doors of the ballroom and pushed them open, stepping into the cooler air of the lobby corridor. "Going somewhere, Layla?" Her blood froze. It wasn't Zaid's voice. She turned around. It wasn't Silas Thorne either. It was the head of Thorne's security team, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He was blocking her path to the exit, and behind him, stepping out of a service alcove, was Silas Thorne, holding a tablet. Thorne looked at the tablet, then at her. He was smiling again, but this time it was the smile of a man who had just won a very large bet. "Facial recognition is a wonderful tool," Thorne said smoothly. "It took my team about 10 minutes to run your image against public databases." He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was her driver's license photo. "Adela Vance," Thorne read. "Waitress at l'Orangerie. Fired yesterday. Rent overdue. Mother in Mount Sinai Hospital." He looked up from the screen, his eyes dancing with sadistic glee. "You're no heiress, my dear. You're nobody." He snapped his fingers. The large security guard stepped forward and grabbed her arm, his grip like an iron manacle. "Now," Thorne whispered, "let's go upstairs and see what my old friend Zaid is doing in my suite. I have a feeling you're going to be very useful leverage." The elevator ride to the 14th floor was the longest 40 seconds of Adela's life. Silas Thorne hummed a tune. Something classical, something chilling, while his security guard, a man whose neck was thicker than her waist, held her arm, twisted behind her back. "You're shaking, Adela," Thorne noted, watching her reflection in the polished brass doors. "Don't worry. Zaid won't let anything happen to you. Or maybe he will. He's a very pragmatic man. Let's find out what's worth more to him. His father's legacy, or a waitress with a fake accent." The doors chimed. Ping. They opened into a lavish penthouse suite. It was dark, lit only by the city glow through the windows. The room was silent. "Zaid," Thorne called out, his voice booming. Come out, wherever you are. I brought you a souvenir." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shadow detached itself from the heavy oak desk in the corner. Zaid al-Hamid stepped into the light. He looked calm, terrifyingly so. In his right hand, he held a small silver flash drive. He had found it. He had the leverage to bury Thorne forever. "It's over, Silas," Zaid said, his voice level. "I have the ledger. I have the bank transfers. I have the emails from the shell companies in Panama. You're done." "Am I?" Thorne smiled. He stepped aside, revealing Adela. Zaid's eyes shifted to her. For a split second, the mask slipped. Adela saw pure, unadulterated horror flash across his face before the ice slammed back down. But she saw it, and Thorne saw it too. "Adela," Zaid said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," she choked out, tears stinging her eyes. "I tried to leave. They knew. They'd checked the databases." "Smart girl," Thorne said, patting her cheek. She flinched, but not smart enough. "Now, Zaid, here is the deal. You are going to put that drive on the table. Then you are going to slide it over to me. Then you are going to get on your knees and apologize for breaking into my room." "And if I don't?" Zaid asked, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the drive. Thorne pulled a small, sleek pistol from inside his tuxedo jacket. He didn't point it at Zaid. He pointed it at Adela's knee. "Then Adela here will have a very hard time waiting tables for the rest of her life," Thorne said casually. "I'll start with the left knee, then the right. Then we'll see what else breaks." The air left the room. "Zaid, don't!" she screamed. "He'll destroy you. Don't give it to him." "Silence!" The guard twisted her arm harder, and she cried out in pain. Zaid took a step forward. "Let her go, Silas. This is between us." "It was," Thorne said, "until you brought a civilian into a war zone. The drive, Zaid. Now, or she screams." Zaid looked at the drive. This was 10 years of work. It was his father's vindication. It was the key to his empire. He looked at the metal stick that could destroy his enemy. Then he looked at Adela. He looked at her terrified eyes, her cheap dress shoes peeking out from under the couture gown, the woman who had stood up for him when no one else would. Slowly, deliberately, Zaid lowered his hand. He placed the drive on the coffee table. "Let her go," Zaid said. Thorne laughed, a wet, victorious sound. "Kick it to me." Zaid kicked the drive across the carpet. Thorne stopped it with his foot. He didn't pick it up immediately. He savored the moment. "You see, Adela," Thorne mocked. "Every man has a price. Yours was apparently high. I'm surprised." Thorne picked up the drive. He pocketed it. "Now, gentlemen," he nodded to his guards, "we have a problem. Zaid has seen my safe. Adela has seen my gun. We can't just let them walk out the front door, can we?" Zaid stiffened. "We had a deal." "I lied," Thorne shrugged. "I'm a criminal, Zaid. We lie. Throw them off the balcony. Make it look like a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Suicide pact. Very Romeo and Juliet." The guard holding Adela shifted his grip to drag her toward the window. The other guard moved toward Zaid. It was over. They were going to die here. But Zaid didn't look at the guard approaching him. He looked at his watch. "You shouldn't have gloated, Silas," Zaid said softly. "What?" Thorne frowned. "You spent 3 minutes talking," Zaid said. "I only needed 2. Zaid raised his voice, shouting a single command in Arabic. "Alan!" "Now!" Suddenly, the floor-to-ceiling window behind Zaid shattered inward. Glass exploded into the room like diamond rain. 2 figures in black tactical gear swung in on ropes from the roof, crashing through the glass. At the same moment, the door to the suite was kicked off its hinges with a deafening crack. Zaid didn't wait for the confusion to settle. He moved with a speed that blurred in the low light. He lunged at the guard nearest him. A brutal, sickening crunch echoed as Zaid's elbow connected with the man's throat. The guard went down, gasping. The guard holding Adela was distracted by the explosion of glass. She didn't think. She reacted. She stomped her high heel down onto his instep with every ounce of strength she had, driving the stiletto through the leather of his shoe. He howled and loosened his grip. She tore herself free and scrambled backward, crashing into a side table. "Kill them!" Thorne screamed, waving his gun wildly. He aimed at Zaid. "No!" Adela shrieked. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the table and hurled it. It didn't hit Thorne, but it smashed against the wall next to his head. Ideally, it distracted him for a split second. That second was all Zaid needed. He tackled Thorne. They crashed onto the Persian rug, a tangle of limbs and tuxedos. The gun skittered across the floor, sliding under the sofa. Thorne punched Zaid in the jaw, a heavy blow that snapped Zaid's head back. Blood sprayed from Zaid's lip. But Zaid didn't stop. He wasn't fighting like a CEO anymore. He was fighting like a man possessed. He rained blows down on Thorne, raw, unrefined, furious punches. That punch is for Punch, my father, punch, and that punch is for her. Thorne was unconscious before the tactical team even reached them. Zaid stood up, breathing heavily, his knuckles raw and bloody, his shirt torn. He looked wild. He looked around the room, ensuring the threats were neutralized by his security team, who had just breached the door. Then his eyes found Adela. She was huddled by the broken window, shivering, covered in glass dust. "Adela," he breathed. He crossed the room in 2 strides and fell to his knees in front of her. He didn't care about the glass cutting into his suit pants. He grabbed her face in his hands, his bloody fingers staining her skin, checking her frantically. "Did they hurt you? Are you cut? Tell me," he demanded, his voice shaking. "I'm okay," she whispered, her teeth chattering from shock. "I'm okay. Zaid, the drive. He took it." Zaid pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. He held her so tight she could feel his heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "To hell with the drive," he growled into her hair. "Let him keep it. Let it burn, I don't care." "But your father..." Zaid pulled back to look at her. His eyes were soft, unguarded. "My father is dead, Adela. You are alive. I almost lost you. I thought, when he put that gun to you..." He couldn't finish the sentence. He just kissed her forehead, fierce and protective. "Mr. Al-Hamed," one of the tactical officers said, stepping forward. "The police are in the lobby. We have Thorne secured." Zaid stood up, pulling her up with him. He kept his arm wrapped around her like a steel band. He looked down at the unconscious Silas Thorne. "Search his pockets," Zaid ordered. The officer retrieved the flash drive. He handed it to Zaid. Zaid looked at the little silver device. He looked at Adela. Then he handed it to the officer. "Give this to the FBI," Zaid said. "Along with the recording from the security system I hacked into before you breached. It recorded his confession, the kidnapping, the threat to life. Thorne isn't just going bankrupt. He's going to prison for 20 years. They walked out of the suite, stepping over the shattered glass. The hallway was filled with hotel staff and guests looking terrified. Zaid didn't look at them. He looked at Adela. "I'm taking you home," he said. "I don't have a home," she murmured, the adrenaline fading, leaving her exhausted. "I have a tiny apartment with an eviction notice on the door." Zaid stopped. He looked at her with an intensity that burned. "Not anymore," he said. 2 months later. The sun was setting over the Manhattan skyline, painting the clouds in shades of violet and gold. Adela was standing on the balcony of the Obsidian Tower penthouse, holding a cup of tea. Real tea with cardamom, the way Zaid liked it. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "Mum, the doctor says the new treatment is working miracles. Also the nurses are asking when that handsome man is coming to visit again. I told them you're keeping him all to yourself. Love you." She smiled. The debt was gone, paid in full the morning after the gala. Zard hadn't just paid the bills. He had bought the debt from the collection agency and erased it. He had moved her mother to a private wing at Mount Sinai with the best specialists in the country. She heard the glass door slide open behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, warm and familiar. Zaid rested his chin on her shoulder. "You are thinking too loud," he murmured. "I can hear it from the office." "I was just thinking about the restaurant," she said, leaning back into him. "L'Orangerie?" Zaid scoffed. "I bought that building, you know. I fired Marcus. I turned it into a shelter for at-risk youth. Much better use of the space." She turned around in his arms. He looked tired. He had been in meetings all day, merging Thorne's liquidated assets into his own. But he looked happy. The lines of stress that had etched his face 2 months ago were gone. "I wasn't thinking about the building," she said. "I was thinking about the water." The water? The water I spilled on you, she grinned, the single drop of red wine that started World War III. Zaid laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound that she now heard every day. Best mistake you ever made, he said. He ran his thumb over her cheek. You know, people are still talking about Layla al-Fayed. They wonder where the mysterious Jordanian heiress went. And what do you tell them? I tell them she went back to her kingdom, Zaid whispered, leaning closer. But that I found someone better. Someone real. He reached into his pocket. For a second, her heart stopped, thinking it was another work crisis, another flash drive. But he pulled out a simple, velvet box. I promised you I would pay you $100,000 for that night, Zaid said. You refused to take the money. I told you, you paid for my mum. That was enough. It's not enough for me, Zaid said. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond the size of a fist. It wasn't the emerald necklace. It was a simple, delicate gold band with a small inscription in Arabic. What does it say? She asked, her throat tight. Zaid took the ring out. He took her left hand. Sharikat Hayati, he read softly. Partner of my life. He looked deep into her eyes. I don't need a translator anymore, Adela. But I need a partner. I need someone who will tell me when I'm being an arrogant idiot. I need someone who will stand in front of a gun for me. I need you. He didn't kneel. He stood eye to eye with her, as an equal. Will you stay? Not as my employee, not as a fake fiancé, but as mine. She looked at the ring. She looked at the man who had burned down the world for her, and then built a new one from the ashes. She took the ring from his hand and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Only if you promise one thing, she said. Anything. Name it. I'll buy it. She laughed and grabbed him by the lapels of his shirt, pulling him down for a kiss. No more tap water, she whispered against his lips. Only sparkling. Zaid smiled and he kissed her, a kiss that tasted of tea, cardamom, and a future that was finally, beautifully theirs. Deal, he said. They say love is found in the strangest places. For Adela, it was found in a spilled glass of wine and a fearless defense of her dignity. She taught a billionaire that power isn't about how much money you have in the bank. It's about who you're willing to fight for when the chips are down. Zaid al-Hamid thought he could buy anything, but he found the one thing that wasn't for sale. A woman who saw the man beneath the suit. In the end, the waitress didn't just serve the table. She turned the tables. And the billionaire? He finally learned that the most valuable currency in the world isn't oil or gold. It's loyalty. If this story gave you chills, if you cheered for Adela when she spoke Arabic, and if you swooned when Zaid came back for her, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button right now. It helps us create more stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder to never let anyone treat them like they're just anything. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.